Hi everyone, this is Corinne, and my author that I chose is Laurie Halse Anderson. So about Laurie. Laurie was born and raised in New York, and she grew up always loving to write, but she wasn't very motivated. And she would join a foreign exchange program when she was 16 and ended up moving to a pig farm in Denmark for 13 months. And when she came back, she decided that she did not want to be a farmer or work minimum wage, and she went to college. And she actually ended up transferring into Georgetown and graduating in 1984 with a degree in language and linguistics. Laurie's been married twice and has two daughters that she had with her first husband, Greg Anderson, and two children from her second husband, Scott Larrabee, who she reconnected with after she was divorced from her first husband. And he actually happened to be her high school sweetheart, and they're still married. He actually built her a cottage that she goes to write to, which is kind of nice. She began as a freelance journalist for The Inquirer, and while she was doing that, she started writing children picture books. In 1996, she wrote Nito Runs, and that was actually about Kenyan Olympic runners. And then she also used her daughters for inspiration and was able to write two books involving her experience with her kids. The first one being Turkey Pox, and that was based off of her daughters getting chicken pox. And then she also wrote No Time for Mother's Day with the same characters. After she had been somewhat successful in being published with picture books, she started in 1999 to write young adult novels, and that's when we hear about Speak. So, Speak was basically put Laurie Halse Anderson on the map. It became a New York Times bestseller. It became a movie, a finalist for the National Book Award, won the Golden Kite Award and the Edgar Allan Poe Award, was the runner-up for the Prince Award, and was translated into 16 languages. And if that weren't enough, the overwhelming success of this book reached a lot of people, and people wrote to her about how much it impacted them and influenced them. And she actually used the emails and the fan mail that she received from people who were touched by this book to write a poem composed of all of the pieces that they had said. So now I'm going to show you this. This is her reading it at the 10th year of Speak anniversary.
So because Speak's been out for 10 years, I wanted to be able to share with people the reader reaction to the book, because I've gotten tens of thousands of letters and emails, but it wouldn't have been right to share any of those letters and emails because they were sent to me. They weren't sent for publication. So what I did is I wrote a poem. This is my first poem that's ever been public. It's kind of another first for me. The first stanza of the poem and the last stanza of the poem are my words. And everything in the middle, all the stanzas that start with the word you, those come from, those are phrases and letters and words that readers sent to me. And the poem, because the book is called Speak, so the poem is called Listen. You write to us from Houston, Brooklyn, Peoria, Rye, New York, LA, DC, anywhere, USA to my mailbox, my space Facebook, a live journal of BFFs whispering 100,000 whispers to Melinda and me. You. I was raped too. Sexually assaulted in 7th grade, 10th grade, the summer after graduation. I was 16, I was 14, I was 5, and he did it for 3 years. I loved him. I didn't even know him. He was my best friend's brother, my grandfather, father, mommy's boyfriend, my date, my cousin, my coach. I met him for the first time that night, and 4 guys took turns, and I'm a boy, and this happened to me, and I got pregnant. I gave up my daughter for adoption. Did it happen to you too? You too? You. I wasn't raped, but my dad drinks, but I hate talking, but my brother was shot, but I'm outcast, but my parents split up, but I'm clanless, but we lost our house, but I have secrets, 7 years of secrets, and I cut. Myself, my friends cut, we all cut to let out the pain. My 5-year-old cousin was raped. He's beginning to act out now. Do you have suicidal thoughts? Do you want to kill him? You. Melinda is a lot like this girl I know. No, she's a lot like me. I am Melinda Sarah, Melinda Rogelio. I am Melinda Megan, Melinda Amber, Melinda Stephen, Tori, Philip, Navdia, Tiara, Mateo, Christina, Beth. It keeps hurting, but But this book cracked my shell. It keeps hurting. I hurt, but your book cracked my shell. You. I cried when I read it. I laughed when I read it. Is that dumb? I sat with the girl. You know that girl. I sat with her because nobody sits with her at lunch, and I'm a cheerleader, so there. Speak changed my life, cracked my shell, made me think about parties, gave me wings. This book opened my mouth. I whispered, cried, rolled up my sleeves. I hate talking, but I am trying. You made me remember who I am. Thanks. P.S. Our class is going to analyze this thing to death. Me. 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 Weeping.
So as you can see, that book affected a lot of people, and it really did put Laurie Halse Anderson on the map. And because she was able to touch so many people, I think that's probably what inspired her to write more books along the same lines, where she takes an interesting situation that young adults find themselves in, and she researches it, and then she makes a story out of it. And the stories usually involve a coming of age issue where they realize they hit a turning point and they have to make a choice to overcome whatever they've been struggling with. Like in Speak, when Melinda, the main character, is able to finally let everybody know what happens to her and she stands up for herself. And in Winter Girls, when there's a girl who's struggling with anorexia and cutting, she finally finds the will and the desire to live, and she's able to go into rehabilitation and take it seriously and become better. So these are really important things for young adults to realize, that it is possible when facing a struggle to overcome them. I think that's one of the things that she does best, is she relates to people who feel unrelatable and shows them a way out and gives their nameless struggle a voice. So after Speak, her other works that were successful were she got into historical fiction, and she wrote Chains, which is a story about a young girl during the Revolutionary War, not Revolutionary War, I'm sorry, during the Civil War, and she is trying to get freedom, and she was promised that she'd be able to be freed, and then they go back on their word, and so she's a young girl fighting for freedom. And she also did Fever, which takes place in 1793 when yellow fever breaks out, and it's a girl who's dealing with everybody she knows being ill and trying to get better and move on. And those were both successful and received awards. But then she also just continued to do her young adult books, and she did Winter Girls, which I started to talk about, where there's a young girl whose best friend dies of bulimia, and she herself struggles with anorexia and cutting, and she goes through a downward spiral when her friend dies, and she eventually is able to pull herself out of it at the end. And The Impossible Knife of Memory tackles a family that has an interesting dynamic where the mother is passed and the father is somewhat of an alcoholic, and he suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. And his daughter is basically taking care of him and trying to go to school, and she's actually a very strong character. And that's one thing that's unique about Laurie Halse Anderson, is that her characters all have very different voices. And Speak, Melinda had a very dark sense of humor, but she was funny even though it was a dark topic. Winter Girls, however, was just generally pretty dark. And then in The Impossible Knife of Memory, even though it's also a difficult topic, the main character is very strong and very empowering, and she is very funny, and she has a very different sense of humor than her other characters, which just goes to show the talent of an author that can make all of her characters sound so different. And then she wrote Catalyst, which is a book that takes place in the same school as Speak. And she wrote Twisted, which is the only book that she's written from the male perspective. And it talks about issues of being a man in the modern world and all of that good stuff. So she's very diverse in what she does, and she tries to reach people. And she does take into consideration what her fans want to hear. People write to her about things that they're struggling with, and it inspires her to create new books and stories. Which leads me to why I read Laurie Halse Anderson. I chose this author because I think that it's amazing how she can make all of her characters sound so different. When you read a lot of books, usually authors have a very specific style that all of their main characters have in common, and they all are very similar to each other because they're often very similar to the author or how the author wishes that they themselves were. But her books are very different, and all of her characters are very versatile. They are some are strong, some struggle, some are affected by something internally, sometimes it's externally. So very different, but all excellent. And she even dabbled in picture books and was successful there. So I think that she's a great author to read as just to study because of her ability to be so different. And I also think it's interesting to note all of the different themes she has throughout her books. They're all so unique. Like in Winter Girls, the chapters for each book were like the numbers on a scale because it was about eating disorders and the girl was weight obsessed. And so, I mean, the books themselves also reflect the topics. So that is Laurie House Anderson. And these are my references, should you care to look. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys again on Wednesday about the books in more detail. Thank you.